All right, in this video we are going to be talking about some of the structures that are considered appendages. These are going to be things like the hair and the nails, modifications of the skin tissue that ultimately are going to be additional things that come off from the integumentary system. We'll also talk about our sweat glands and other types of glands that we find in our skin and their function. So first of all, hair is going to consist of dead keratinized cells. It covers the skin except where you have thick skin, so palms, soles of your feet, and then a few other select places as well, such as the lips and parts of your external genitalia. The nerve receptors in our hair follicles can help detect insects and other things moving on our surface. The hair on the scalp guards against physical trauma, heat loss, and sunlight. The hair that makes up our eyelashes help to shield the hair or shield our eyes, while nose hairs are going to help filter particles from the air while we inhale. The type of keratin that makes up the hair and the nails is going to be slightly different than the type of keratin that we find in our normal epidermal cells. So this is considered hard keratin. It's tougher and more durable, making it so that the individual cells do not flake off, and thus it has that advantage over soft keratin that you find in the typical epidermal cells. The chief regions of the hair follicle are going to include the root, that is the part over here that is embedded in the skin, and the shaft, which is the part the part here that is above and coming out of the skin. Associated with the hair follicles are a muscle, and you can see it right here. That is the known as your erector pili muscle, which means raiser of hair. This is the muscle that's responsible for giving you goosebumps. When they contract, they pull the hair follicles upright and produce dimples on the surface of the skin. They're made up of smooth muscle cells, so this is an involuntary reaction, oftentimes associated with emotional contexts, things like being scared, where your hair kind of stands on end with it. All right, so the second type of appendage that we're going to talk about is going to be our nails. So this is, again, a modification of the epidermis and is going to consist of hard keratin, just like the hair. You have a clear protective covering that's on the dorsal surface of the distal part of your finger or toe. So a few things to note. We have the nail plate. That's the part that you typically are going to see most of when you look at your nail. It sits on top of the epidermis that is known as the nail bed. So that's the portion down here that is going to be made up of actual skin tissue. The nail matrix is what is responsible for the growth of the nail, so that's going to happen down here on the more proximal end of it. The covering of that region, so you can kind of see it in this portion, it would be right along here, along this side, that covers that portion, so extending down in there. That is known as the lunule, which means little moon. The proximal and lateral borders are overlapped by folds. And then we have the cuticle or eponychium, That is the proximal fold of the nail matrix that ultimately folds onto the nail. So you can see this portion right here that is folding onto the actual nail that is continuous with the nail matrix. The hyponechium is the thickened region at the end of the nail that is beneath it. That is going to be where your nail is going to accumulate dirt and other debris as it works around in the world. All right, so this brings us to glands. There are going to be three types of glands that we talk about. Two of them are going to be sweat glands. So our sweat glands are also known as our sudiferous glands. We have two types. We have the eccrine gland, which is a type of merocrine, and the apocrine gland. We'll talk about the apocrine gland next. In the case of the eccrine sweat gland, the secretory part is going to lie in the dermis. So that is going to be this portion right here that's secreting, and then the duct is going to extend and go to the surface of the skin, so it empties at a pore. The secretion of a sudiferous gland is going to be sweat. Sweat is going to be a filtrate of blood, so your blood is going to filter out certain substances and thus be hypotonic. So hypo meaning less, tonic referring to the solute, has less solute, more solvent compared to your blood. The function of the sweat glands primarily is to prevent overheating. So you sweat, and as the sweat evaporates, that helps to cool off the body. Also, you find trace metabolic waste and microbe-killing peptides, such as dermacidin, as well as some sort of acidic environment. So the acidic environment and the dermacidin are together going to act as antimicrobial agents that help protect your body. All right, the apocrine sweat gland is going to also lie in the dermis, but it's going to be lower down compared to the eccrine sweat gland. The duct, instead of emptying at the surface of the pore, it's going to have a pore opening into the hair follicle. So this represents a apocrine sweat gland that's emptying out into here. The secretion is going to include sweat and fatty substances. So it's going to be viscous with a milky or yellowish color. This is actually odorless, but bacteria will metabolize it and give off a musky odor that is responsible for body odor. These glands typically don't really start functioning until puberty. There's not a whole lot that they're thought to do in humans, although they are thought to produce some things that we would consider pheromones for sexual attraction. Modifications of these glands include ceruminous glands. Ceruminous glands are going to be the wax glands in our ears that help protect the ear. It mixes with sebum ultimately to produce cerumen, which is your earwax. And then the other modification is going to be mammary glands that ultimately are going to secrete milk. And then our final type of gland are our sebaceous glands. So these are glands that are going to connect to and empty directly into the hair follicle. So we see that third gland over here on this picture representing that. The secretion instead of sweat is actually sebum. Sebum means greasy or oily. So these are going to secrete an oily substance that ultimately helps to protect the hair and the skin around it. So these are a type of holocrine glands. They burst, leaving cell debris and accumulated lipids behind, which we call sebum. The erector pili contractions are going to be responsible for forcing sebum out of the hair follicles, where it will empty into the hair follicle typically and lubricate the hair and skin. This ultimately is going to prevent the hair from becoming brittle, and because it is a non-polar substance, it's going to help with preventing water loss. Additionally, it does appear to have some bactericidal action, so it can play a slight role in immunity and immune function in that capacity. All right, that does it for our conversation about the appendages of the skin. In our next video, we are going to talk about some of the homeostatic imbalances that are associated with the skin. So I'll see you next time.